My parents donated my 3600 worship equipment to fund my sister's mission trip. So I left the church, and what I did next left them in chaos they never expected. I'm 22 and I've been into worship music and sound engineering for as long as I can remember. It's not just a hobby, it's been my calling since I was a kid. I've spent years saving up from part-time jobs, church gigs, and every birthday or holiday gift I could stretch to build what I called my worship setup, a custom 3600 music production system. It wasn't just about playing music either. I used it for recording worship songs for our church and other congregations, which helped me earn extra money and develop skills for ministry. Now let me introduce you to my family. My parents are the classic God knows what's best types, but their definition of God's will usually revolves around my younger sister, Grace. Grace is 18 and has always been the golden child of our church community. If you've ever met someone who thinks God has specially blessed them above everyone else, that's her. She's all about mission trips, Christian conferences, and anything that makes her look spiritually superior. My parents bend over backward to make sure she has every ministry opportunity she wants, even if it means stepping on me to do it. I grew up in a household where it was always clear Grace came first. If church funds were tight, it meant I had to give something up. My mom would say things like, "You're older, you can handle disappointment better," or "God is calling Grace to greater things right now." I got used to it and figured, whatever, I'll just work hard for what I want. I didn't resent Grace, I just focused on my own calling and stayed out of their way. Fast forward to a few months ago, it was a regular Saturday after youth group. I'd been hanging out with my friend Marcus, he's my best buddy, and the guy I lead worship with the most. We were talking about the upcoming regional worship conference we wanted to attend, even brainstorming new arrangements for Sunday service. I got home that afternoon ready to work on some new tracks for our church's Easter service. But when I walked into my room, there was the surprise. My desk was empty. My mixing board, my microphones, my recording interface, everything was gone. For a second, I thought I'd been robbed, but nothing else in the house seemed out of place. I ran downstairs to find my parents sitting in the living room, casually reading their devotionals over coffee like it was just another day. "Hey, where's my music equipment?" I asked, trying not to freak out. Mom glanced at me, not even remotely bothered. "Oh, we donated it," she said. I stared at her, trying to process what I just heard. "You what? Donated it? What do you mean you donated it?" Dad sighed like I was being dramatic. "Your sister needed funding for her mission trip to Guatemala. We didn't have the money, so we donated the equipment to the church auction. It was just sitting there." "Just sitting there?" My voice got louder. "That equipment wasn't just sitting there. I worked for years to build that setup. I use it for recording worship music for our church and others." "Don't take that tone with us," Mom snapped. "We're your parents, and we did what was best for God's kingdom. Grace has an important calling, and you can always save up for more equipment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Save up for more? Do you even understand how much time and effort went into building that studio setup? And what about my ministry work? How am I supposed to fulfill recording commitments now? And what's this mission trip for Grace that's more important than my calling? Dad, in full Pastor Dad mode, waved me off. Recording music isn't a real ministry anyway. You spend more time playing around with technology than actually serving God. They always said that, and I didn't care. Music production was part of my ministry, sure, but that equipment wasn't just for fun. It was how I served God and built something entirely my own for His glory. The fact that they couldn't see that or didn't care was like a slap in the face. I stormed back to my room, but I couldn't calm down. I texted Marcus to tell him what happened. He was just as shocked. "Dude, that's insane. They didn't even ask you first." "Nope. Just donated it for Grace's stupid mission trip," I replied. "She's so spoiled, man." Hindsight, right? But at that moment, all I could think about was how years of effort were wiped out in an instant and no one in my family seemed to care. That night, I decided to confront Grace. I walked into her room, and there she was, arranging her new mission trip gear and taking selfies for her Instagram with the caption, "God is so good." "Do you even know what Mom and Dad did to fund all this stuff?" I asked, leaning against her doorframe. She barely glanced at me. "What are you talking about?" "They donated my music equipment, my 3600 worship setup, gone just so you could have your mission trip." She shrugged, still arranging her gear. "So? It's just equipment. You can always build another setup." I couldn't believe her indifference. That wasn't just equipment, Grace. It was years of saving, working, and building. It was my ministry, not my problem, she said with a smug grin. It's not like I told them to donate it. She paused for a second, her tone turning defensive. Besides, it's not my fault they thought it was a good idea. They're the ones who actually donated it, not me. Her words made my blood boil. You mentioned it, didn't you? You knew exactly what they'd do, and you let it happen. Grace rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Oh, please, don't act like I control what Mom and Dad do. If they donated your precious little equipment, it's because they thought it was the best choice for God's kingdom. That's on them, not me. I couldn't believe how heartless she was. She paused for a second and added, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your little music toys, you'd understand what's actually important for ministry. I have souls to save in Guatemala. You're just sitting in your room playing with soundboards all day. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. She didn't see the problem because she'd never had to work for anything in her ministry life. Everything she wanted was handed to her on a silver platter, and my parents were happy to keep it that way. Over the next few days, things at home were tense. My parents acted like nothing happened, while Grace posted Instagram stories about her upcoming mission trip preparations. Every time I thought about how casually they decided to donate something so important to me, my frustration grew. Marcus kept checking in, trying to keep me grounded. You gotta do something, man. Don't let them get away with this. But I also keep thinking about turning the other cheek and ignoring it. I truly don't know anymore. Do you guys think I'm overreacting? If my parents thought they could walk all over me, they were about to learn otherwise. The days that followed were rough. I could barely look at Dad and Mom without feeling like my blood was boiling. Every time Grace walked past me flaunting her mission trip merchandise, it was like she was rubbing it in my face. I tried to avoid them as much as possible, holing up in my room with my old beat-up keyboard. I used it to get by with church gigs, but it was so limited, like using a kazoo to lead a cathedral choir. It was a far cry from my custom worship setup. And every time I struggled to meet a recording deadline or couldn't get the sound quality I needed, my frustration grew. Marcus was a lifeline during all this. He kept me sane when I felt like I was drowning in frustration. He'd call me up at random times just to check in, or talk about something completely unrelated, like the latest worship songs or a funny church meme he'd seen. One night, as I was venting to him again about how ridiculous my family was being, he said, "You know what? It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly ministry. Except in your case, they made it personal, and now they're treating it like ministry. It was personal. This wasn't just some kingdom donation. This was my family showing me exactly where I stood in their spiritual priorities." At that moment, I realized I had to do something, not just to get my equipment back, but to make them see they couldn't keep treating me like an afterthought. So I gathered every piece of proof I could find that the equipment was mine, receipts from the components I'd bought, photos of the setup process, and even records of my church recording earnings to show how important it was for my ministry. I also reached out to the person who had won the equipment at the church auction. They were sympathetic but firm. No returns unless I paid them back the $1,200 the church had received for it. And here I am right now. I'm actually thinking about letting it go. It seems like too much trouble. And honestly, the thought of confronting my parents again makes me want to bang my head against the sanctuary wall. Do you guys think I'm overreacting? Should I just turn the other cheek and move on? Update 1, confrontation. Hey folks, I didn't think things could get messier, but somehow they have. As I told you before, I was torn between choosing to stay silent or confronting my family. But then Marcus reminded me, if you don't stand up for yourself now, they'll just keep doing it. They'll think they can take whatever they want from you, whenever it's convenient for God's work. So I confronted them after Wednesday night Bible study. I figured it was the best time to get them all in one place. I sat down at the kitchen table staring at my parents while Grace scrolled through her phone, completely oblivious. Mom was mid-sentence about some church gossip when I cut her off. What money? The $1,200 the church got from auctioning my worship equipment, I said firmly. I built that setup with my own money. Legally, it belongs to me. You had no right to donate it. No. You made a decision for the family without asking me, I shot back. That's theft, plain and simple. Dad leaned back in his chair, his face darkening. Watch your tone, boy. We're your parents. Everything in this house belongs to us. You live under our roof, so technically that equipment was ours to give to God. That's not how it works, I said, keeping my voice steady even though I wanted to scream. I pulled out a receipt and held it up. This says I paid for the parts with my own money. This is proof that it was mine. And this, I handed them the auction receipt, proves you donated it for $1,200. You owe me. How dare you accuse us of stealing? We did this for Grace's ministry. She's your sister. Family is about sacrifice for God's kingdom. Yeah, it seems like I'm the only one making sacrifices, I snapped. Grace gets everything handed to her, and I'm expected to just praise God and roll with it. Not anymore. Either you pay me back, or I'll take legal action. Try me, I said, locking eyes with her. Grace, who had been silent up until now, finally chimed in. Oh my God, are you seriously threatening Mom and Dad over some equipment? You're pathetic. No, I said, glaring at her. What's pathetic is that you're perfectly fine with taking advantage of someone else's hard work without a second thought. You knew what they did, and you didn't care. She rolled her eyes. It's not my fault they decided to donate it. I didn't make them do anything. Oh, you mentioned it to them. You knew exactly what you were doing, Grace. She gave me attitude. I only mentioned your equipment because you're always complaining about how busy you are with recording work. I thought you'd appreciate focusing more on actual ministry. Her voice was calm, like she was the victim here. Appreciate focusing on ministry? I said, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? That equipment was my ministry, Grace. Grace smirked, unfazed. Wow, you're twisting this into my fault. You're the one who's always talking about how you're called to music ministry. I figured you wouldn't mind helping out the family's ministry for once. Isn't that what being a good Christian is all about? My fists clenched under the table. Helping out? You didn't need a mission trip to Guatemala, Grace. You just wanted it. There's a difference. She scoffed. Maybe you're just mad because I know how to follow God's calling, and you're too busy sulking to figure it out. Don't blame me for being more obedient than you. I swear I almost lost it, but Dad slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Enough! We'll pay you back, but don't expect anything else from us. You're on your own from now on. I laughed bitterly. I've been on my own for years. The difference now is I'm done letting you take advantage of me in God's name. I took the money without a word. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step forward. I contacted the auction winner again, and they agreed to sell the equipment back to me for the same price. Picking it up felt like getting a piece of my calling back. But as much as I loved having my setup again, I now knew things wouldn't go back to the way they were. My parents and Grace aren't going to change, and I can't keep living under a roof where I'm treated like a second-class Christian. It's time to figure out my next move. I'm honestly thinking of leaving the church. Is it a good idea, or am I putting myself in more spiritual trouble? Update 2, the move. I knew leaving wouldn't be easy. I didn't have a huge savings cushion, and finding a new church home wasn't going to be simple. But I had my music ministry work, and I was determined to make it work. I called Marcus. He had been my sounding board through this whole mess, and I knew he'd have ideas. Dude, you need to get out of there, Marcus said as soon as I told him my plan. You can crash at my place for a bit if you need to. Thanks, man, but I think I need my own space. I've been living under church politics for too long. I just need to figure out how to swing it financially. Marcus was silent for a moment, then said, what if you double down on your recording ministry? You're good at it, and there's definitely demand from other churches. You could even start an online worship channel. He wasn't wrong. I dabbled in online worship content before, but church life had gotten in the way. Now, with my equipment back and a fire lit under me, it seemed like the perfect time to give it another shot. That night, I started researching apartments. My budget was tight, so I focused on small studios or shared housing. After a few hours of scrolling through listings, I found a tiny place a few miles away. It wasn't much, a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was within my price range and close enough to town that I wouldn't feel isolated. I reached out to the landlord, who agreed to meet me the next day for a tour. When I walked into the apartment, it hit me how real this was becoming. The place was bare bones, but I wanted it. I signed the lease that same day and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The next challenge was packing up my life without tipping off my family. I wasn't planning on making a dramatic exit, but I also didn't want to give them a chance to guilt trip me into staying with scripture verses and talk about honoring parents. Over the next week, I slowly started moving my stuff out. I'd take a box or two at a time and stash it at Marcus's place until I was ready to make the final move. Meanwhile, I dove headfirst into freelance recording and online worship content. I updated my portfolio, reached out to past church clients, and even started advertising my services on Christian forums and social media. The response was better than I expected, and within days I had enough work lined up to cover my first month's rent. As my move-out day approached, I started avoiding my family as much as possible. Grace didn't seem to notice. She was too busy posting mission trip countdown posts on social media. My dad and mom, on the other hand, seemed to sense something was up. They started dropping little comments at dinner like, "You've been awfully quiet lately," or "You should let us know if you're planning anything big." She asked, stepping inside before I could even answer. "I don't really have anything to say to you," I muttered, shuffling papers on my desk. "Just hear me out," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed like everything was normal. "You have to understand, we didn't donate your equipment to hurt you. Grace mentioned it when we were trying to figure out how to fund her mission trip. She said you didn't use it that much anymore and that it was worth a lot of money. We thought maybe it was God opening a door." I turned to face her, my jaw tightening. "So you're saying this was Grace's idea?" She sighed, looking almost guilty. "Not exactly, but she suggested it, and we thought she made a valid point. We thought you'd understand." Her words made my stomach churn. Grace had planted the seed, and my parents had just run with it. "You thought I'd understand?" I said, my voice sharp. "Understand that you donated something I worked years for because Grace wanted a mission trip?" Instead, she stood up and left, as if her half-hearted explanation was supposed to make it all better. That's the kind of person Grace was. She'd twist things to get what she wanted. She'd act innocent, drop a hint here and there, and suddenly her ideas became my parents' divine inspiration. The morning of my move came faster than I expected. I loaded up the last of my boxes and left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't dramatic, just a few lines explaining that I needed space and time to focus on my own relationship with God. I didn't want a confrontation, and I knew if I tried to explain in person, they'd just try to guilt me into staying with Bible verses about family. As we set up my recording equipment in the corner of the room, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. That night I went live on my worship channel for the first time in months. The viewer count was small, but it didn't matter. I was in my own space, doing something I loved, serving God on my own terms. This is how things unfolded lately. I have a bit of a weird feeling, but I'm trying to push through it anyway. If anything pops up, I'll post an update. Final update. Hey everyone, here's an update on how things have been since I moved out. I thought leaving would be the end of the drama, but boy was I wrong. After one day of moving out, I had recording gigs to tackle and a worship stream schedule to figure out. But there was a nagging thought I couldn't shake. Would my parents even care that I'd left, or would they just write it off as me being rebellious against God's plan? I didn't want validation from them. I'd long given up on that, but part of me still wanted to know if they'd even noticed I was gone. By mid-afternoon, I got my answer. Mom called me. When I didn't pick up, she left a voicemail. "You could have at least told us you were leaving," she said. "Your father and I are very disappointed in how you handled this." Family is about sticking together in faith, not running away from God's plan. I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. A few minutes later, Dad tried calling, but I ignored him too. Then came the text barrage. Mom started with, "You've really hurt your mother and grieved the Holy Spirit," followed by, "We've always done what we thought was best for your spiritual growth." Then Dad chimed in with a classic, "You're being reckless and turning away from God." I put my phone on silent and went back to work. I wasn't about to let their spiritual guilt-tripping derail my day. But that evening, as I was setting up my worship stream, a new message popped up, this time from Grace. "You left?" Anyway, Mom's freaking out, so you might want to call her before she has a prayer breakdown. It was such a textbook Grace response that I didn't even bother replying. Instead, I focused on my stream. I was starting to get a small but supportive group of regular viewers, and the sense of community they brought was something I hadn't realized I needed. People who actually appreciated my ministry, who showed up just to worship with me and hear me do what I loved. It was refreshing. The next few weeks were a mix of progress and lingering frustrations. On one hand, my freelance recording gigs were picking up and my worship streaming audience was slowly growing. On the other hand, my parents wouldn't stop trying to reel me back in with spiritual manipulation. The texts kept coming, alternating between guilt trips and outright condemnation. "You're turning your back on your family and God," Mom wrote one day. "Grace is upset too." Don't you care about how your actions affect our Christian witness? Grace upset? That was rich. She barely acknowledged me when I lived there unless she needed something for her ministry. And now I was supposed to believe she cared? I ignored the text, but they left a bitter taste in my mouth. One evening, Marcus came over to hang out, and he brought it up. So have your parents calmed down yet? Nope, I said. They're still texting me like I owe them some kind of spiritual explanation. Classic guilt play. You think they'll ever let it go? Probably not, I admitted, but I'm not going back. Living there. I wasn't healthy spiritually. They don't respect my calling, and they never will. Yeah, but have you told them that? I paused, realizing he had a point. I'd been ignoring them, but I hadn't actually confronted the root of the problem. Part of me didn't want to, because I knew it wouldn't change anything. But maybe for my own peace of mind, I needed to say my piece. It took me a while to find the right words, but eventually I sent a message to my parents. I've made my decision, and I'm not coming back. This isn't about being rebellious against God. It's about following His calling for my life. I've spent years feeling like my ministry didn't matter to you, and I can't keep living like that. I hope you'll respect my choice, but if not, I'll still be moving forward in faith. I hit send and immediately felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't expecting a positive response, and I didn't get one. Mom replied with a long, rambling message about how I was being deceived by the enemy and how Grace's ministry had always been their priority because God had called her to greater things. Dad followed up with a blunt, "You'll regret this when you face God someday." But instead of feeling hurt or angry, I felt free. At least now I didn't feel the need to argue or explain myself further. Their words didn't hold the same power they used to. It was a selfie of her at the airport with her mission team, with the caption, "So grateful for my amazing parents who always prioritize God's kingdom work." I rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. I didn't need to engage. Let her have her little spiritual superiority complex. It wasn't my problem anymore. A few days later, a family friend ran into me at a coffee shop. "I heard you moved out," they said, raising an eyebrow. "Your parents are having a tough time. You know they've been asking the church for financial help." I frowned. "Help? What do you mean?" "They've overextended themselves funding Grace's ministry activities. I think they thought you'd still be there to pitch in with your recording income." That's unfortunate. And I meant it. It was unfortunate for them. For me, I was doing great without them. After that conversation with the family friend, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of validation. My parents' finances falling apart wasn't something I took joy in. It just confirmed what I'd known for a long time. They'd prioritized Grace's ministry once over family stability for years, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, I was finally learning what it meant to follow God independently, and I wasn't about to let their choices drag me back into their chaos. That didn't stop the guilt trip text from coming, though. Mom's messages became more desperate. "We're struggling here, and you've left us to deal with everything on our own." She didn't reach out, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. She probably figured she'd let our parents do the heavy lifting and wait for me to cave. One day, Marcus came over again. He had a grin like he had something big to tell me. "Guess who I ran into at the Christian bookstore today?" he said as we sat down. "Who?" I asked, already knowing it was probably someone connected to my family. "Your mom," Marcus said, chuckling. "She cornered me by the devotional books and went on this whole rant about how you've abandoned the family and are being influenced by worldly thinking, which I'm assuming includes me." I rolled my eyes. "I told her you're doing great in your ministry, and maybe if they respected your calling more, you wouldn't have had to leave," Marcus said, smirking. "She didn't take it well." I laughed, but inside it stung a little. Not because of what Mom said, at this point I was used to her spiritual dramatics, but because it was another reminder of how little they understood me. They weren't upset because they missed me. They were upset because they'd lost control. A few days later, Mom sent another text, this one different from the others. "Your sister's mission trip send-off service is coming up. We'd like you to come home for it. It would mean a lot to her." Part of me wanted to believe this was their way of extending an olive branch, but I knew better. It wasn't about reconciliation, it was about appearances. They wanted to play happy ministry family for a night, and I was supposed to pretend everything was fine. I showed Marcus the text and he shook his head. Don't do it, man. They're just going to pull you back into their drama. I know, I said, sighing. But if I don't go, it's just going to give them more ammunition to say I'm the bad guy. Who cares what they say? Marcus shot back. You're not living your life for them anymore. You don't owe them anything. He was right, of course. Deep down, I knew that. But saying no to my family, even after everything, was harder than I wanted to admit. So I did something I hadn't done since I moved out. I called Mom. When she picked up, her voice was dripping with fake warmth. Oh, honey, it's so good to hear from you. Hey, Mom, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I got your text about Grace's send-off. Yes, we're having a beautiful service, just the family, she said quickly. Grace would love for you to be there. I don't think I can make it, I said firmly. I'm really busy with ministry work right now, and honestly, I don't think it would be a good idea. There was a long pause before she responded. You're really going to let your sister down like this? After everything we've done for your spiritual development? And there it was, the spiritual guilt card, right on schedule. Mom, this isn't about Grace. It's about the fact that every time I try to have a relationship with you guys, it feels like I'm the only one putting in any effort. I'm not coming to the service because I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not. She didn't take it well, to say the least. Fine, she said. If you want to throw your family away for your selfish ministry, that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost. Oh, Pot. That was the last straw. Mom, I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval in ministry, and it's never been enough. So no, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally putting God's calling for my life first. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. It felt like cutting a rope that had been holding me back for years. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew I couldn't keep living in their spiritual shadow. After that call, I blocked Mom and Dad's numbers. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was necessary. The constant texts and calls weren't helping anyone, and I needed space to focus on my own relationship with God. Grace didn't even bother reaching out, which honestly made things easier. With the family drama out of the picture, I was able to throw myself fully into my ministry work and streaming. One night, while I was streaming, someone in the chat asked, "What made you start doing online worship?" For a moment, I hesitated. I hadn't talked about my family situation publicly. It felt too personal, but then I realized it didn't matter. I started streaming because it's something I'm passionate about, I said, but also because I wanted to prove to myself that I could build a ministry on my own without anyone holding me back from God's calling. The chat lit up with messages like respect and you're an inspiration, bro. It felt good to know people appreciated what I was doing, not just for the music, but for the story behind it. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed that I wasn't angry anymore. I still didn't want a relationship with my parents or Grace, but I didn't feel the need to dwell on it. Cutting ties had given me the peace I needed to move forward in my faith, and for the first time, I felt truly free to serve God. One day, Marcus and I were hanging out, and he asked, "So do you think they'll ever apologize?" I shrugged. Probably not, but honestly, I don't need them to. I'm finally living my life according to God's calling, and that's enough for me. Now I'm building a ministry where my hard work is valued and my calling is celebrated, not dismissed. To anyone reading this and dealing with something similar in your church or family, you don't have to stay where your calling isn't respected. You deserve better. And walking away isn't giving up on faith. It's choosing to follow God's plan for your life.